good morning to you all, and that. We had a little discussion in the room beforehand, and sorry, I'm not coming to you first, Peter. Sorry, I'm changing the schedule because I know that doesn't come as a surprise to you because you're the people, Joseph, these are the people generating these numbers. Good morning, Minister, who joins us on schedule. Thank you very much, Minister, and that. But sorry, what I was saying was that you're part of those figures. But I personally am convinced this recession we're going through, Joseph, has been deepened, widened and prolonged by the consistent negativity of the Irish media, right? Because before I came into the room this morning, you know, even and I'm out there in business and I know it's tough, but like we keep being told by Ireland's national media, the country's going to close next Tuesday. And you come along here this morning and, you know, you present the figures, the stats, and so on, and we're performing surprisingly well, and America is still investing in truckloads in our little country, which we think is great, but it's just a small rock off the edge of Europe, let's be honest. But I did note that you sort of said, we have a sort of a thing ourselves called, you know, the fiscal cliff, you know, just, and you sort of dismissed it as, by the way. Now, you know, you're going over the edge of the cliff without a parachute, and I don't think there's a lifeboat below, but, and that. So are you just a positive bunny? You know, are you a Pollyanna? And, you know, sort of, you really enjoyed that free breakfast, and you come over and told us, you're great, and that. You know, I'm not doubting your figures, but that's a very strong case you've presented.
It's a strong case, but let me tell you, the fiscal cliff, yeah, that's a big challenge in front of the United States. And I marvel at the Americas, and they look at the riots in Madrid and the unrest in Greece, and not realizing that I doubt it's going to happen in the United States, but you know, these countries are making some difficult choices that we have to make. I don't think we're going over the fiscal cliff. I think, you know, we'll have a lame duck Congress and a president works something out. The fiscal cliff in of itself, it'll be a shock. It'll drive the transatlantic economy into a recession with spending cuts and the tax increases. I hope that our leaders, our legislators, are a little bit more responsible and you know, get ahead of this before the markets do. So, but in the mean, my point is too, though, Gavin, is that you know, corporations have to get up every day and think about what they're going to do next. In fact, you go to sleep thinking about it. And I think, you know, that, and to me, that's kind of the energy, the dynamic that helps drive this. And it's true in Ireland, it's true in Japan and China. The policymakers are behind. This has been frustrating from a Wall Street perspective policy. Then in the last 4 years, policymakers always seem to be coming from behind. They're behind the markets. The corporations are ahead. They're already problem solving. They're looking for the solutions. There's a disconnect, and our policymakers are behind. I think Europe's is kind of catching up a little bit to the problems. In fact, I'd say Europe's ahead of us now, almost.
All right, so explain for us, please, the BRIC countries, because we keep hearing about it. The investment in Ireland, 2012, is a ratio of about $5 coming to Ireland for everyone going to Brazil, India, China.
I mean, and Hendrik can talk about this as well, since you know GE is a great example of a company, of a company that does something globally. But it's difficult to do business in China. Brazil's in recession. India doesn't know what it wants to be when it grows up. Russia, you know, kind of a one sector play right now. Where Ireland attached to a big, large, wealthy consumer market with a rule of transparency, consumption. The EU, right? The EU is 30% of global consumption. The EU consumes more than the almighty US consumer. So that's what drives us here. And I think the BRICS are going to come. I mean, we pray to God they come, but it's difficulty. We're underestimating the problems and challenges in China. We haven't decoupled. I've been very disappointed in the emerging markets not being a driver of growth. They're contributing to global growth, but not driving it. So they're no more immune to the cyclical forces that we're seeing playing out here. But when it comes to being on the ground in these countries, it's hard. India is a hard place to do business. Wages are rising, the infrastructure isn't there, the labor's not there, and corporations go where they're treated best and where the opportunities are there to put their capital to work. And it leads us back to Ireland and the EU.
The point you make, though, about corporations, go to bed at night thinking about how they can continue to grow, and that we're obviously a little the same in Ireland. We're greedy. We want even more. So Peter O'Neill, our president, of course, IBM been here, well, I wouldn't say forever, but the actual date is 1956. But, if we want to keep it going for the next 50 years, Peter, what do we need to focus on in Ireland to make us even more attractive to maintain and continue to grow US investment?
Okay. Well, first of all, Gavin, just to say in terms of positivity about US investment in Ireland, I put in my Duracell batteries this morning, so yeah. I'm good to go. No, look, I think Joseph in his comments had a nice expression saying, there's a bundle of attributes in terms of why companies invest in particular countries, and Richie mentioned a number of them. In terms of chamber members, there's probably three that I'd focus in on, right? The corporation tax regime does remain centre stage. It's still a very important factor, not just the 12.5% rate, but also in terms of what we do around R&D tax credits, around intellectual property, and the extensive treaty network that we have with 65 other countries. And in fact, the IMD World Competitiveness Report for this year ranks Ireland #1, and that's where we need to stay. We need to hang on to that. The second area I'd focus in on is the whole area of talent. And in my role as president this year, I've been particularly vocal in terms of talent and skills, and there are things we need to improve on. But broadly, we are in a good place. In terms of our demographic structure, it's strong. We still have a very strong birth rate against a backdrop in Europe where the demographic picture is kind of going. We've an aging population; it's going in the other way. We've very good high participation in terms of third level education. So again, I think there's a lot of positives. And in terms of the IBM experience, we've gone through huge transformation in Ireland in the last 10 years. From 10 years ago, 2/3 of our people were in low-end manufacturing. Today we employ more people in Ireland than we did then, but there's nobody in manufacturing. It's all in software development, research and development, services hubs. We couldn't have done that without incredible flexibility and adaptability from our employees. So that absolutely is very important. And the third area I focus in on is the whole question of reputation. I mean, Richie mentioned about having very strong clusters. So I think Ireland is known for the strength of in pharmaceuticals, in terms of the financial sector down in the IFSC, in terms of more internet-centric companies. I see Louise there from PayPal. But also, if you look at the investment that's happened in Ireland over the last number of years, it's not just new companies coming in. It's companies that have been here for quite some time, reinvesting, updating their mandates. And that's because of what companies in this room have done. They have built up a track record of really, really strong execution in this country. And that's why their parent companies come back and said, yes, I like that, I'll have some more of that, please. And they reinvest into Ireland.
In the area of talent, the human resource, though, I hear a lot from tech companies saying, they're finding it hard to get people, particularly people who can write code and that. So that gap needs to be addressed more quickly.
No, for sure, it is an issue, and the Chamber's been very vocal on that, over the last while. And it requires a combination. There's longer term reform. I mean, we saw in the papers this morning in terms of junior cert level reform, so more focus in terms of numeracy, literacy. Understand, there's going to be standardised tests in science as well. So we need to do that long-term reform. But yes, there's shorter-term actions that we need to take. And we met, the board met with the Taoiseach recently, and one of the things we raised is we need to improve our visa policy. We need to make it easier to bring talent into this country to address the current shortages and skills that we have.
Also on stage with us this morning is Hendrik Bourgeois, who's the president of the American Chamber of the EU, and that. So, from an EU perspective, and that, what's happening that is making Europe easier to do business with for Americans, and vice versa?
Sure, thanks. In addition to being the president of AmCham EU, I'm
Vice President of
I'm
GE.
really an employee of the General Electric Company, which is my day job. But I think, for American investors, there's obviously the stuff that we spoke about this morning is to ensure that we return to some type of stability and that we take away the volatility and the perception of Europe and where the Eurozone is going. And I think progress is being made there. I saw that the Irish Taoiseach yesterday, who was in Brussels, made very strong comments about the need to implement the decisions of the European Council in June 21, pushing for a single financial regulator in Europe. And so we need to make progress in Europe institutionally and from a governance perspective to increase integration from a fiscal and economic perspective, simply to restore confidence and to avoid volatility. And once we have that basis, I think, then we can really hope that some of the growth measures that we need to inject in European and EU policymaking will be effective. And the biggest one I think we can work on and we need to push for, and that we are pushing for at AmCham EU, is the single market. The single market has been certainly the attraction for GE and for other members of AmCham EU, the attraction that Europe brings, right? 27th or 28th in the future, in the short future, countries where there's no barriers to trade, where free movement of goods, of people, of services, of capital, of workers, obviously generates a lot of economic benefits, efficiencies, productivity, growth, and jobs. And so this is what we need to protect because it's an initiative that was launched 20 years ago now. But in reality, the single market is not finished yet. There are still a lot of opportunities to deepen the single market and to broaden it. I'm sure there are Irish and businessmen or business people in this room who are still confronted with issues of market access even within the European Union. And I can give you a lot of examples, but we really need to continue the work. Just to give you two examples, perhaps. One, there's this general acceptable principle of mutual recognition in the free movement of goods and products, which means that when you put a product legally on the market in one member state of the European Union, automatically you're authorized to sell it in another member state. And that's by and large true for most of the products that are being sold in the European Union, but there are still pockets where it's not the case, where producers, manufacturers are faced with national standards, national regulations that kind of prevent them from selling their product within the European Union. So there are still examples there. Another important point where we need to make a lot of progress is in the services sector. Services represent 75% of European GDP, yet the proportion of services to intra-European trade is only 25%. And so there's a huge amount of work and progress that needs to be done to ensure that there's a free movement of services within the European Union. And then last but not least, I would say an area that I know well is the energy market. When you look at the prices of energy, the prices of natural gas and electricity in the European Union, and you compare it to the prices of energy in the United States, it makes Europe less competitive on a global basis. For energy-intensive industries, for the chemical industry that use a lot of gas, for instance, as a feedstock, as a raw material to make their product. And one of the reasons why we have still high prices, energy prices in Europe, is because we still have a fragmented European market. We don't have enough cross-European competition on energy in Europe today. There are not sufficient infrastructures that interconnect national markets. And the infrastructure that they are still somewhat outdated in many countries. So there is still a lot of things that we need to do to really achieve a true single market in all the sectors of the economy.
And are our leaders, the European leaders, just, they're frozen, are they not, with just the financial crisis and the threat to the Eurozone? So, is work being done at advancing, making it a truly single market?
Yeah, I think, there's two different things, right? I think it's true that, policymakers are always behind the markets are always behind what the business expects. But that's normal. We shouldn't be surprised about this. We live in democracies. I think, the message to the financial markets and to the business community is, they're going to muddle through. And we cannot really expect more, I think, at this stage. And I think a lot of progress has been made in the last year and a half. And we will still have crises, and we will still need to address issues as these crises erupt, step by step. But people understand, I think, that the situation is serious, and I think we see also the desire not to waste a crisis in Europe. I see that. I think we are doing things that we wouldn't have done if it hadn't been for the crisis. And for instance, just yesterday, the European Commission issued its so-called Single Market 2, which is, a second round of proposals to make progress in the single market, which I was alluding to. There are other proposals on the table to increase trade. For instance, on the external side, there's a hope that negotiations will be launched between the EU and the United States on a comprehensive trade agreement. Hopefully that will happen in the spring of next year, which could be the seed of a transatlantic single market. It won't happen today, tomorrow, or in the short future, but maybe in 10, 15 years from now, we will not have tariff barriers between the US and the European Union. We won't have as many non-tariff barriers, regulations that prevent European companies from selling into the United States and US companies from selling into Europe. And so I think a lot is being done, but it's all going to take time and a lot of efforts. But certainly I think, generally, to go back to your initial question, I think Ireland has, in a way, shown the way for other Eurozone countries on how to address it.
I want to look beyond Europe because we hear about sort of, and we like to sell Ireland as the gateway to Europe, right? But Joseph, you were saying, we need to go beyond Europe, and so I want to come to that in a moment. And Hendrik has mentioned, US-EU negotiations to get underway on trade next year. But Hendrik, just this morning when I met you, you felt it was quite significant that Ireland was holding the EU presidency at this time because ministers like Richard Bruton are very conscious of the American-Ireland relationship, and this is a time to put it on the table. You're expecting big things of us, that we should be able to drive things forward in advance of those talks next year.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much time, but I think first of all, in my experience, and I've been looking at European affairs for a significant part of my professional career now, small countries like Ireland, or like my country, I'm Belgian, are usually very efficient and effective presidents of the European Council because they can really play a role of the role that they're supposed to be playing, which is to be a fair arbiter between the larger member states who have usually very vested position on a number of files. And so that's number one. So I have a lot of hopes that the Irish presidency will be a very successful one, and I think it's looking very good. It's going to be very difficult because there are a lot of painful issues that need to be discussed, that need to be decided in 6 months after January 1. The first one is I think for us, of great importance is the European budget. It is the 7-year multi-annual financial framework for the EU, which is in reality the only common growth instrument that we have in Europe, which is ridiculously small. It represents less than 1% of European GDP. And yet there are currently already suggestions that it's not going to be as big as being suggested by the European Commission. And in particular, what we're very concerned about is that those areas where we need to really focus on in that European budget, we need to ensure that those areas will be protected. And I'm thinking in particular of research and development. The European Commission has proposed an envelope of 80 billion euros to invest in R&D. It's called the Horizon 2020 program. And I know that already today, some member states are questioning the size of that envelope. I hope that sanity will prevail, and that, after a very successful Irish presidency, we'll have a credible EU budget, but it's going to be very difficult.
Okay, I'm sure you're feeling the pressure, Minister, as regards what's expected. Joseph, you mentioned in your wonderful presentation it was to get all those numbers crunched into a few minutes and give us such a helicopter view of how well we're performing and where we've got to go. But where we want to go, according to you, is we need to start looking at our neighbours. So it's the EU, but beyond, not just the near neighbours. So I suppose we use the term, as you know, EMEA. It's the EMEA part we need to start focusing on. Why is that so significant?
Because, they're untapped markets, and, with Russia just coming into the WTO, I don't think they'll follow the path of China. But when China entered the WTO, they had to lower tariffs, non-tariffs that really expanded trade and investment within China. There won't be a similar hockey stick effect in Russia, but nevertheless, they're stepping into the global markets. Ukraine, Turkey, the Middle East, Northern Africa. I realize it's all very much in flux, but there's a lot of demand there. There's a lot of demand that hasn't been met. The problem is, how do you employ these people? I think employment is going to be a big issue. How do we integrate this part of the world? They haven't been part of globalization, the Middle East in general. So I see a lot of opportunity there, but it's going to be difficult. There's going to be policy setbacks. There's going to be unrest. But at the end of the day, that's a huge swath of geography that we're missing. We're all, it's the bricks. We get lazy thinking about the world. We should think differently about this swath of geography and the potential. Sub-Saharan Africa is doing very well. Reach down there, new markets, new middle classes. Believe it or not, Nigeria has a middle class, believe it or not, that's coming along that needs to be tapped into. So I'm very excited, recognizing, however, how unstable the current situation is. And this is where it's so important, like Hendrik and Peter were talking about. It's so important for the United States and Europe to get over some of these problems, roll up their sleeves, and start working again together to not only make the relationship stronger, but to deal with these peripheral issues that require our attention.
And I presume, as an economist, that would be a quick rule of thumb. Look at where middle classes are growing and emerging in developing countries around the world, because they're the people who want to purchase brands and services and things like that. So, but these countries don't even come on our register sometimes, because, the fashion is to talk about China or go to the US and that. So we've got more to do in that area.
Right, but I think both of these companies here have figured out a long time ago that it's a big global economy, and they're virtually in every country in the world. So these and others in the room, you know that. I'd like to see more corporations educate the media and the masses about how we do business and where.
Yeah, because Hendrik, you were saying our European leaders, our policymakers are behind it, but really it's the citizens who, don't sort of sometimes realise where it's, even no matter how much you communicate it to them, the media are looking back, whereas people like yourselves are looking forward. Minister's going to be talking in a few minutes. President, what's the wish list? Not that you would canvass Minister Bruton at this hour of the morning, but just hearing our two colleagues there, where are we upping our game in the second half, as it were?
You do ask all the right questions.
Yes, yeah. So we're in the team dressing room now.
Well, look,
half time. Give us what we have to
Hendrik
do.
has spoken about the EU budget. We've got a national budget coming up in December. I've already spoken about the short-term skills issue, and it's important we address that. But in terms of the budget coming up in December, recognise the challenge that Minister Bruton and his colleagues face in terms of the $3.5 billion adjustment that we need to make. But if there was one request I would make, it's simply this: is we just cannot afford to put a further tax on talent in this country. The feedback from our CEOs around the country is very, very clear. We are at a tipping point in terms of personal taxation. A marginal rate of 51%. For a lot of people who are not on high incomes, it is a critical point in terms of both the attraction and retention of talent. So my request to the Minister would be simply whether it's through PRSI increases or any changes within the overall income tax regime, that we away from that. With unemployment at just under 15%, we have got to give companies the breathing room here to get on with what they do well, and let's get on to growth, and let's get on to further employment. So, Minister, that would be the number one request from our members in terms of the upcoming budget.
All right, well, that's where we're going to conclude our panel discussion, but I'm sure as an audience we want to show our heartfelt appreciation to Joseph Quinlan, Hendrik Bourgeois and Peter O'Neill. Thank you very much. I just also want to add my words to Brian's earlier words, just to say a big thank you to Bank of Ireland, Derek, and your team. I'm making this a little personal, but now that Richie Boucher isn't here, I can say, and it doesn't sound like I'm just flattering him and that. But, on a Sunday night in Ireland, 700,000 people watch a business programme called Dragon's Den, and it is sponsored by Bank of Ireland, who I'm very aware also are doing their bit for SMEs. Never mind the work you're doing, Derek, in trying to attract corporate investment in Ireland. So, with that outrageous plug, I just wanted to sort of, but say thank you to Mick Sweeney, Pori Burke, Mark Cunningham, and the team that we deal with, Derek, and that. And again, it was a pleasure to be with a panel like this. Thank you very much.
Very good.